All right, I think I've seen the trickle of folks coming into the meeting slow down a little bit, so I think we are going to get things started. So thank you everybody for joining our webinar today. My name is Andrew Spevacek. We'll be talking to you about workflows and integrations WELL has set up related to self-monitoring and checking of symptoms and the communication workflows that we've got set up via WELL to help you maximize the utilization of those tools that you have in place to help your patients, your members, your constituents self-triage and report their own symptoms. So we'll get right into it, start with some introductions. Perfect. So like I said, my name is Andrew Spevacek. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at WELL. I oversee our integrations and relationships with the folks that we'll talk about a few slides from now that are helping you to triage your patient population, your members, and your constituents, really getting a grasp on how the virus is spreading and who's impacted. I've got Alexx joining me today. I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexx Hoholik. I'm a client success executive at WELL, so working directly with our client base. Previously, Director of Strategic Programs at MD Live, one of the leaders of the telehealth space. And Andrew, before we continue, do you mind just doing a quick reminder for questions and the handouts that are available?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a member of our team, Hayden, is waiting for folks to submit questions as we go. There'll be a question section actually on the console for the GoToWebinar. If you want to drop questions there throughout the presentation, Hayden's ready to respond to those as we go. We'll also have time at the end to talk through any questions that you have, but want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get those answered as we're going through the slides themselves. And then also there's a handout section in the GoToWebinar control panel. In that handout section, we have the playbook that we distributed as kind of part of the invite and that we put together specifically around the workflows that Alexx and I will talk to today. So feel free to reference that as we're going. We'll call it at high level a lot of the content that's included in that playbook. And that's a good takeaway from this meeting, just as a refresher. And for those of you that are current users of WELL, a good way to outline exactly how you can leverage your current deployment of WELL specifically to what we'll talk about today. And for those of you that are new to WELL, gives you a good snapshot of the types of workflows that we can deploy in detail for you. Thank you, Alexx. And that leads us into the agenda itself. A quick overview of what we're going to cover. We're going to start by talking really about what's at stake here. There's a ton of volume, a ton of triage and inbound questions that we're getting from our patient population, helping our customers to manage. We want to highlight a little bit of what that means and what we're seeing across current WELL users. We'll then get into a discussion about what WELL can do to help. Now, obviously, you're leveraging tools to specifically help with the collection and triage of patient symptoms, but we want to show how WELL can help with the engagement, getting the patient to that tool at the right time. And then we'll talk about specifically what that means for kind of three specific entities that we've been working with on the WELL side to help deploy the workflows that Alexx will talk to in detail at the end of the presentation. There's obviously unique use cases for each of these three entities, and we want to highlight a few of those that we've been working on in each space. We'll then go in, we'll talk about specific workflows, like I said, that are highlighted in detail in that playbook that's linked in the handout section of the control panel. So we'll talk about those workflows in detail. We'll actually give you a quick snapshot of what that looks like in WELL, so you can see an actual interaction between one of our staff members and the console itself, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A. So with that, I think I'll hand it back over to Alexx, let her highlight a little bit of what she's seen across our customer base.
Awesome, thanks, Andrew. So kicking us off here, working directly with clients of WELL, we have seen a pretty drastic increase over the past few weeks, as expected, from patient inquiries related to COVID-19, whether that's questions about symptoms they're experiencing or questions about what they can and can't do, what appointments might need to be rescheduled or canceled, and what appointments are still be conducted virtually. So as you can see here by this graph, it's very apparent that there's a drastic increase in those inbound messages from patients that are requiring, where the setup is applicable, that manual response from your staff. So inundated with questions and a need to respond. So what does this increase mean? The reality is there are costs of manual triage. What we're seeing is obviously the time that has to be spent, whether that's a staff member, a front office staffer, whatever that is, they need to spend time with those patients, constituents, or members to help answer their questions. That's taking time. It's on an individual basis. The next is their health risks. If that triage is happening in person, there's obviously a potential threat of contamination or spreading of symptoms related to COVID-19. You could have inconsistent results. Conducting triage on an individualized or manual basis could lead to a variation in what's recommended in terms of care plan and the information that is gathered. We do know that the CDC is providing guidelines on how to appropriately triage patients with COVID-19 symptoms, but those guidelines and questionnaires are changing regularly. So if you are looking at a tool that you want to leverage as a system checker, it's definitely great to have one selected in mind to maintain consistency for your patients, members, or constituents. Ultimate goal is to be able to eliminate inconsistent results by, avoiding patients or members or constituents going to a variety of different symptom checker tools. And then finally, delayed responses. With an increase in inbound inquiries, it's taking time to get back to them, whether that's waiting on hold or waiting in line in an office. There is a delay for getting patients the answers that they need and potentially the care that they need. So with all these realities in mind, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrew to talk us through what's going on.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned on the previous slide, when she was talking about the inconsistencies and the number of solutions that are on the market, we recognize that there are a whole host of products that you have to choose from that you feel meets your situation the best, meets your specific patient population, and is a solution that you trust to put in front of your patients, whether that's folks like Buoy or diagnostic robotics that are in that space outside of COVID-19, or folks like Google and Apple that are coming in specifically to release their own product and attempt to help folks like us with the virus and controlling the virus itself. And then obviously there's an option to develop a tool yourself. The CDC makes these guidelines available. It's just all about which tool you trust. And I think what I would take away from this slide is that well is agnostic to the tool that you use specifically for allowing patients to check their symptoms remotely. We've built integrations with a handful of folks, even beyond what's listed on the slide. So we have experience kind of integrating across a variety of different vendors in the space. But we want to make sure that whether it's a patient or a member or one of your constituents, we're routing them to the tool that you trust. And I think the workflows that we'll highlight later in the deck will show that we've developed something that's really universal to the tool that you're using. And if we want to hop to the next slide, I think that also was something we were able to accomplish because across those three entities that I mentioned before, your health systems, your government agencies, and your payers, really the problem is for the most part the same. Everybody's trying to identify how the virus is spreading and or being contained. We're trying to give accurate information to those patients, constituents, or members in the right context and to give them that response in a timely manner. And we want to give the individual that's reaching out the right course of action and a course of action they can trust. They're coming to you because they trust you to give them advice around a shared problem, no matter which of the three entities you represent. And I think that the workflows, as Alex will demonstrate later, that well is developed are positioned to support that common problem. But we do recognize that there are differences across those three entities, and I think I want to just spend a moment highlighting those to give you some food for thought as we talk about workflows later in the deck. So if we hop to the next slide and just talk about health systems to start, really health systems need to give confidence to their patient population. You need to manage that patient population in non-traditional ways. Obviously, the growth of not just telehealth, but other virtual services, asynchronous visits, and the ability to interact with your patients in a remote manner, something that needs to be deployed quickly, and an effective communication strategy and supporting technology, integrated supporting technology like what Well has built with some of those symptom checkers that you saw a few slides ago, really will build trust in your patients and allow you to effectively triage that increase in volume that Alexx mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. We recognize that health systems have unique needs. You're treating patients, whether they're planned or unplanned encounters, having to deal with coordinating patient care related to COVID-19 along existing conditions that you're treating the patient for, and scaling your staff to treat both traditional volume and the volume that's coming in COVID-19. And I think one thing that I want to draw your eyes to when we get to the use cases overview is the Well's ability to triage and auto-respond to patients that are asking questions about your symptoms. That's really Well's capability of saying, hey, we recognize that a patient has asked you and expressed that they feel like they're symptomatic. Well has the ability to both route that conversation to the group of users, the staff on your side that you're using to respond to COVID-19 related cases and inquiries. And we're also able to automatically give information back to the patient, in this case, potentially redirecting them to a symptom checker to help triage and evaluate their symptoms so that you can provide the best advice in terms of what care steps they should take next. Well's capable of doing that through our core product, through the workflows that are highlighted in that handout in our COVID-19 symptom checker playbook. We'll highlight that a little bit later on in the presentation. If we want to transition to payers, and payers like health systems are certainly concerned about getting the patient the right care, but they're unique because they manage members that span individual providers and offer services like telehealth that they can get in front of the patient before that patient is even intending to contact their provider. So the payers play a unique role in having that comprehensive view of the care that the patient has or is intending to receive, and has the ability to reroute the patient to other services like telehealth in advance of having that patient actually interact with their provider. So I think the payer plays a critical role in the triage of patients that are expressing symptoms related to the virus. And I mentioned telehealth a number of times. One thing that we can share with the attendees here coming out of this meeting is a playbook that Well developed specifically around enabling the use of telehealth. I think the two workflows, both the one that we're talking today in terms of getting the patient in front of a symptom checking tool and also getting the patient triaged then to a virtual service like telehealth, go hand in hand. As we'll talk about later in the use case slides, we have the ability to mass outreach to member populations, both check for symptoms, and then based on the patient's kind of risk profile that the symptom checker returns, Well can say, hey, it's appropriate for the patient to utilize a virtual service like telehealth, or they need to present in person, or the EMS needs to be contacted because they really are at risk. So I think those workflows from Well triaging the patient, directing them to submit and record their own symptoms, and then based on the risk profile that symptom checker returns to Well, get another virtual service in front of the patient, go hand in hand. So we'll certainly share that playbook around telehealth coming out of this webinar. And then lastly, I do want to touch on the unique use cases that our government agencies, that our departments of health are having to manage. In particular, I think they take the activity of identifying and monitoring cases of the virus, really to another level. They're not just concerned about patients that, are receiving care in a specific facility or in a specific health system. They're not just concerned about patients that intend to receive care or have received care or of a specific profile like the Payors are. They're really interested in monitoring the entire population of the state, both from the cases that are suspected of having the virus, those that are confirmed, but also those folks that have come in contact with suspect or confirmed cases, so they can identify how the virus is spreading or growing or being contained in specific areas. So I think, that goal of being able to pinpoint where that virus is taking hold and ensuring it doesn't spread is critical, so that they can then come back and ensure their constituents get the right care, whether it's directing them to one of their health system partners in the state, or ensuring that quality of life care gets those patients that are in self-isolation or quarantine. And I think that one of the use cases I want to highlight here is that, WELL is working with the state in particular on the East Coast to help monitor symptoms of those patients that are in isolation or quarantine, and also to collect symptoms from those patients that have been, or those individuals that have been identified as in contact with a suspect or confirmed case of the virus, so the state can perform contact tracing. I think it's really critical for the state to be able to keep an eye on how the patient is progressing or regressing, so that they can accurately pinpoint how the virus is spreading and deploy resources to those specific areas to help meet the needs of their individual constituents. So yeah, I think I'll hand it over to Alex here, but just to recap, I want to make sure that we touched on that universal problem that I think everyone's trying to solve, and then also touched on the fact that there are unique use cases that each one of the three entities that we highlighted here in this deck are intending to resolve. And WELL's use cases and workflows that Alex will talk through in detail are designed to be extensible in a way that they can meet each one of those unique scenarios that each entity is trying to solve. So with that, I'll hand it back to Alex to start talking about those workflows in detail.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew. Just a friendly reminder to everyone, if you do have questions while we're going through the webinar, in your control panel, there's a question section. Please submit them. We have a member of our team standing by, and we'll hopefully answer some of those towards the end of the webinar. All right, so just to talk through, again, WELL's messaging toolkit. Now, I know some of you probably have attended one of our recent webinars, so you might have seen these before, but just to reiterate and recap for those that might not be familiar, WELL has three main messaging components or pieces of functionality, and those are campaigns, broadcasts, and automations. And we'll do a quick overview of each one and then start to talk through those individual use cases that Andrew mentioned. When it comes to a campaign is intended to be a one-to-all communication method. The idea here is to spread mass communication to a patient population, a constituent population, or even a member population, with the intent of driving awareness of a symptom checker tool, encouraging the use of that tool, potentially answering any frequently asked questions, and then obviously to direct relevant patients to the appropriate resource. Broadcasts are going to be a one-to-many, and broadcasts have a great functionality where you can reach out to multiple patients, but you can be patients, members, constituents, but you can be very selective of who those individuals are. So this is really focused on looking at specific appointments for up-and-coming dates. So an example here, before you're coming into the office for your appointment, please take a look at our symptom checker tool. This could be the right resource for you to direct you either to stay home, come into an emergency room, or to a virtual care offering. And then finally, automations are really a focus of a one-to-one dialogue. And these can be specifically used for appointment notifications and reminders, and focusing on those patients that have up-and-coming appointments that could be around certain symptoms, or if you're directing someone to a different method of care, targeting those individual appointments through an automation with more of that one-to-one manner is key here with our automations capability. So just to quickly recap, being able to communicate through the WELL platform, specifically on symptom checker tools, leveraging campaigns, broadcasts, and automations, depending on the group of people or individuals that you are looking to reach. With all that being said, and with that quick level set, we're going to get into some specific examples here with symptom checker tools in mind. So as Andrew mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're kind of breaking these out into proactive forms and reactive forms of communication. Proactive is sending out communication prior to an inbound message from a patient, constituent, or member with the intent of reducing that inbound volume. Reactive, on the other hand, will be responding when those inquiries come in and responding in the most efficient and effective manner. So a couple proactive tactics. We talked about that mass outreach to target populations. And again, these are all going to be available in your playbooks as well in the handout section of the control panel. But when it comes to a campaign, whether that's reaching out to an entire portion of a health plan member base or a set of your patients, letting them know that if they are feeling specific symptoms related to COVID-19, cough, fever, difficulty breathing, that they take advantage of your, selected or desired symptom checker tool as a first step to figure out the appropriate care plan. So again, reaching that vast majority of population. The next is that broadcast functionality and targeting those health systems when they are reaching out to their patients, targeting those specific up and coming appointments and letting them know, if you're experiencing these symptoms, coming into the office might not be the best option at this time. Please use our symptom checker. We're here for you. We are offering you tools, but we want to make sure we're routing you to the appropriate method of care. A couple other proactive tactics, specifically, as I mentioned a few slides ago on those appointment reminders and those automations. So pre-appointment for scheduled appointments that you have on your books, this can be set up to happen in an automated fashion. So at a set period of time before a scheduled appointment, letting those patients know, just a reminder, you have this tool. If you are experiencing these symptoms, this could be your best form of an appropriate care plan from here. The other is post-encounter. So if you have a patient that comes in for their appointment, where applicable, definitely reminding that patient that this symptom checker tool and other tools that you are offering, whether it's your patient population during this time, it's definitely important to keep these tools in mind, especially letting them know that it's not just them that could take advantage of it. Potentially it's family or friends that could also use this tool. Really important to spread awareness where possible and keep the knowledge shared going around these tools. So on the flip side, we have those reactive tactics. Again, this is in response to an inbound message from a patient. And again, the idea here is to treat these as efficiently and effectively as possible. So how do we pick up on keywords that are being used and sent in from patients and automatically either send a response or notify the appropriate team members? So within the Well platform, effectively gathering those specific messages and then addressing them. User groups is definitely a great tool to take advantage of, whether that's COVID-19 team, triage team, symptom team, whatever that might be, collecting a group of resources on your team that are dedicated to help people that are reaching out related to COVID-19 symptoms just ensures that as you receive that inbound influx of messages and questions from patients, that you are immediately seeing those and directing them to the right resources to do any potential outreach or getting the right messages and resources out to those patients. And then the other component here is that auto response. And I'm actually going to show you kind of a real instance of that taking place where we are picking up on keywords in a message and we are automatically sending a response. So that will be this instance here. So essentially we have a patient that is messaging in, following up on an appointment, but letting the staffer know that they are having body aches and chills, which body aches being a symptom of COVID-19. So we want to pick up on those keywords. Automatically, as you can see by that well-bot identifier, this is an automatic message. There's no manual intervention required to drive this response, but that patient is immediately being notified that they've been flagged by the language that has been used, and are being triaged to the triage team here, and being asked to have an evaluation done, and let them have access to the symptom checker tool with a direct link to the tool. The other component that's going to also automatically happen in this instance, again, this is configured within the Well platform, that Well bot is identifying that internal mention, which is the yellow box, is automatically notifying that COVID-19 triage team of a patient that could potentially need additional assistance. So to monitor the channel and reach out to this patient either in advance of their visit as a follow-up, but just to keep this patient in mind to ensure that they get the appropriate care. So again, it was one text message that came in from the patient, and that blue and yellow message response were automatically triggered from Well. So just a way for us to ensure that patients are quickly getting responses and are being directed to the right tools based on their needs. So with all those examples being said, Andrew, I'll turn it back over to you to wrap this up.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And thank you, everybody, for taking some time to think through and look through the content that we prepared. We really hope that it's meaningful for the workflows that you're trying to deploy and to help get that tool that you're leveraging for patient self-triage in front of the patient, like I said earlier in the deck, in the right context. We have our contact information here on the slide. This content will be shared with everybody that participated today. So don't worry, we'll get this all over to you after the call. But I did want to stop for any questions that the folks on the call have, and maybe I'll start with a couple that were submitted in advance of the presentation, and then let individuals hop in with questions that they had that came up as we were chatting. So the first question came from Janelle Newman. She was asking about syncing information into Epic and OCHA's in particular risk stratification registry. So I answered this in kind of two parts. In terms of Well, a Well does integrate with Epic. We'll kind of consume information about the patient, their upcoming encounters, and things like that to automate outbound content to the patient, like Alex showed in some of those proactive workflows earlier in the presentation. But we can also write message statuses and message results back into Epic. So, a text message was delivered or a phone call was answered. We can exchange that information back to Epic so that there's some sort of record of Well actually reaching out to the patient related to COVID-19. In terms of actually syncing back the risk score and the symptoms of the patient, that's really up to the symptom checker that you're using. I've seen a variety of different capabilities and depth of integration across the checkers themselves, from just being kind of a standalone web chat widget, a tool like you've seen with the buoy or diagnostic robotics that really was in the space before and writing back symptoms and all that good stuff to the LMR, to the EMR. So in terms of writing the risk score or the specific symptoms back to the EMR, that would depend on symptom checker to symptom checker. And then one more high-level question we got from Vlad Toka in advance of the conversation. He's asking, is there an application or link that patients need to download or access to use the product? Well, it does not act on top of an application. We send our messages direct to whatever SMS, that text service that the patient is using. So no app to download if you want to receive the messages that Alex showed in her demo today. We do have a secure messaging portal if you do need to share sensitive information with the patient. But for the vast majority of the use cases, and for all of the use cases that Alex showed today, no app to download, that goes direct to the patient's text service. So I will stop there and open it up to the group. What questions does the group have for Alexx and myself? And if folks are having difficulty getting unmuted, feel free to just post a question into the chat. We can unmute everybody here in a minute if we need to. But let me know in the chat there if you're having difficulties getting unmuted. We'll give it just a couple of minutes. All right. Well, I'll take that as Alexx and I did a good job giving you a comprehensive overview of how well can support getting patients in front of those symptom checking tools that you're leveraging, and in general, just being proactive and reactive to the types of conversations that you're needing to have with patients related to COVID-19. We obviously understand that there are nuances organization to organization. We'd be happy to dive into more detail with you on a one-on-one basis. So feel free to reach out using the contact information that you see on the slide. But with that, I'd like to thank everybody for their time today, for showing up for the webinar. We hope you all, your staff, and your families stay safe, stay healthy, and we look forward to helping you with your specific workflows. You all have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend.